Good afternoon and welcome to Colin, Peter and Neo joining me on this talk for our weekly discussions here at St. George's. This afternoon I have with me Neo Dongwana, who is the chairperson for the Barlow World Limited Group. And I have Peter Campbell, the retired deputy chairperson for the NAMPAC group, and Colin, who is the non-executive director for Ultra Liquors. So it's really great having you all with us, with me this afternoon. And I feel a bit daunted because you are all chartered accountants, and so I have great financial expertise with me this afternoon. And I thought having you all together on this forum, this platform, I'm really keen to pick your minds as to what do you think right now is happening in the world in terms of the economy, and how can we deal with the COVID crisis in South Africa? And maybe we can start with Naya, with you.
Okay. What is happening at the moment? Well, all I can say, there's a lot happening at the moment. I think we are all aware that, COVID has brought with it a lot of uncertainty in the business world. It's brought with it a lot of focus on health, safety, and I suppose for the first time, it is the responsibility, especially since we're on lockdown level 3, it's not only the responsibility of government now, it's the responsibility of employers, which is mostly the corporate sector, and the government, because it's also an employer, to look after the health of their employees. So we're in a situation where we're in a difficult position of having to balance the interests of different stakeholders. That is our employees, our shareholders, different interest groups. And it's extremely difficult in a volatile environment where we already were in an economic recession. So already GDP growth was estimated to be, at the beginning of this year, sort of 2 to 3%. At the moment, depending on who you speak to, it's projected to be between -7 and -10%. So what does that mean to the ordinary person? Job losses, retrenchments, no work, no pay. If you are in certain industries, you under level 3, you can't go back to work. What does it mean? People who are sick and have no medical aids, it's a disaster. But it's not all hope is lost, I would say. And maybe let me hand over to my esteemed, I'm not sure how to call them because they're my elders, so I can't say they're my colleagues. I think it would be enough.
We're your colleagues.
They've been on this road far longer than I have been. So let me hand over and we can talk about that. Not all is lost. Let me do that. Thank you.
Colin, would you say that all hope is not lost, and sort of your take on the current state of affairs?
I certainly would. All hope is definitely not lost. But what is lost is the excesses of the past. I think we became very much a society of excess at the top level. Obviously, those people who were jobless before are jobless now, and there's just a lot more of them have reached that level, which is so sad. And I do think, and I totally support Naya in her comment, that it is time now for all citizens of the world, and particularly in South Africa, to band together and to assist one another through this crisis. They assist one another by not passing it on, but also being reasonable within that, because we have still to live our lives. You can't stop living our lives because this thing is there. And I think to a large extent, and it is probably just because we are of the older generation, I think there was an overreaction to this this pandemic where jobs were lost, where jobs need not have been lost. People put people on, retrench them or put them out of work fairly quickly. I think that is quite sad. I think businesses certainly need to look at what their reserves were of the past and to lean on those to a certain extent, because of the good times have, over years, your 7 lean have go about 7 good and 7 lean. So I do think we as business have a huge responsibility to lean back on those reserves and make sure that we look after those people who've looked after us for that through that time as well. The huge challenges on the youth, where they're going to get jobs. I mean, I really do see that that's an issue. And as Nao so rightly pointed out, we were in financial trouble already, the big financial trouble, and this has just eclipsed that and enabled to a certain extent ill-performing managers to hide behind the fact that COVID has caused the problem, where in fact COVID probably wasn't the cause of a huge amount of the problem of joblessness and poverty at the moment. So yes, we have, all is not lost. I mean, people are getting back to work. I'm delighted to say in our company, we still have the same workforce as we had when we started, this thing started. Similarly with the other various institutions I'm involved in, maybe at less pay. And I think that is something we're all going to have to accept. There's going to be less largesse for us to see the good things of life. But the basic goodness and care and love, I would like to believe that is what's going to come out of this. And we're going to find a lot of people. I just talk about our own complex, where we've been lucky enough to walk. I know more about my neighbors than I ever knew in the past. And it's a wonderful thing. We become a group of friends that we meet for a walk in an afternoon, and we socially distance and we do all that is needed. So I think there will be good things come out of it, but a lot of, and a huge amount of hardship first, though, unfortunately.
Peter, you've been in sort of the financial services for a very long time. And I think that, this is obviously an unprecedented time. How's your take on this? Is this something that the worst?
I actually am very concerned about South Africa, because I don't see from a government point of view that they are moving in the right direction. There is a huge amount that needs to be done, which cannot be done by the man in the street, because most of them will not have jobs. And it would seem as though that is almost irrelevant to government. And there were even some snippets in some of today's papers where it said that there was no concern for the lower paid individuals in South Africa. But if we look at what's been happening from a government point of view, ever since our present president took over, there has been a lot of talk about creating job creation, which actually hasn't happened. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has knocked a lot more jobs off out of the system. But if you look at, there's been continued expenditure by the government on things which they at some stage are going to have to say, this is not the job of the government to run SAA or SA Express. The government should not own a whole lot of SOEs or state-operated enterprises. Those are things that the private sector should be doing, whereas it seems as though the government wants to have more and more control over the economy and the various parts of the economy. And that, I think, is going to be detrimental long-term to any significant growth in the economy or any significant further job creation.
Now, for a person like me, you have to make, sort of decisions about life going forward. What would you advise me?
I suppose, advice is individualized, so you have to always look. Now I'm trying to behave like a financial service provider, which I'm not. They have to be licensed to those people.
Yeah, just in general.
General advice. So for me, I'd say right now, this is not the time to be making decisions, reckless decisions. So if you are in a job, keep it. I know there are a number of people that may be unhappy and saying, they would like to look at other pastures, but perhaps now I would say to you, hang in there. This is perhaps not the time to go elsewhere. Hang in there because, there's a lot of uncertainty. Just let's ride this wave for now. I would say to you, and to Colin's point, that we need to look at our own income statements. And what is an income statement? It's what you bring in to the family as the Dongwana family and what we spend on. And be saying, how much do we bring in as a family, and do we need to be spending on the things that we are spending on? And I can tell you now that certainly there are things we don't need to be spending on. There are some obviously essentials. There are some fixed costs. Fixed cost would be something like your house. You are married to the bank in as far as your bond, if you've got a mortgage bond. And now, in fact, what I would be saying to you is if you've got something like a mortgage bond, interest rates have gone down. Pay in a bit more. If you've got a car, pay in a bit more. So that is a practical advice at the individual level, would be to say, relook at your own income statement and say, what can I do differently? If there are other ways of earning income, go for it. Because in a crisis, I always say to people, look at Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has been in crisis since I don't know when. And people in Zimbabwe, I mean, for want of a better word, there are still millionaires and billionaires. And yes, but they are poor people. I'm not condoning anything that's happening in Zimbabwe for 2 minutes. But what I'm saying is that there is always opportunity in a crisis. So if you see an opportunity, go for it as well. So that would be the long and short of my advice at an individual level.
Thank you. And Colin, what do you think will be the future for business in South Africa?
I think business will have many opportunities to redirect itself and to find opportunities. A classic example, just in my business, we didn't used to have an e-commerce platform, so we didn't deal in that area at all. We opened one during the period of lockdown. We worked on that tirelessly, and we've got it up and running. And I think yesterday it represented 20% of our turnover for the day. So that's a new field that we're looking at that opened itself up to us. I think business also in this time should be cleaning up its act, looking at where there's wasteful expenditure, looking at projects that are just you just like, that aren't necessary. You think they're heart projects, not mind projects. And I think business too must very much understand its role in supporting government and in supporting those who have nothing and are really struggling, and also guiding people, if people are leaving you for whatever reason. And I think Nao's advice is absolutely outstanding. Now is not the time to do anything rash or silly. But it's the opportunity to look for other opportunities to follow. So I think certain businesses, I'm very glad I'm not in the restaurant business, but then I look at what some of those restaurants are doing. I mean, they're not prospering, but they're surviving. And a huge amount of going forward was this whole prosperity life that we were living, because we generally, most people that we would mix with were prospering. That may change to being survival mode, but I don't doubt that we will survive, because there is the ability out there, there's still the people out there, and there still is the will to do better.
And then my final question to Peter, how do you think does faith come into this? And how do you think that faith will sustain us through this time? I mean, you've raised some serious concerns, and then how does faith help us in this time?
I think you've got to hang in there and look after your flock. You've got a big flock that needs help.
Mhm.
And I think that prayer is going to be a very important part of looking after that flock. Because where we were having between 130 and maybe even 170 or 180 congregants coming to church regularly, we haven't yet reopened the church as far as I know. And we are wondering how we are going to cope, I would have thought, with a maximum of 50. And who do you beat down at the door because the church is full with a maximum of 50? That's going to be a worry. But I think that you have a very important task at the moment, as do all of the priests who are in your position, to look after their flock, to help them pray and pray for a change in what is happening in South Africa. Because I believe we need to pray for a change, because if our government continues along its present route, well then one of the biggest construction companies in the world has had to pull the plug on itself today in the newspaper. Group 5, she's gone. And that's not necessary. There are roads, there are bridges, there's so many things to be built in this country. And all those construction companies could be involved in doing exactly that. But there is no work for them because the government has no money, except that it's spending irresponsibly on keeping its SOEs and its various airlines, trying to keep them in the air, instead of just stepping aside. Let them go and keep the money for what is really important from the point of view of a government and what it should be doing in the economy in the country.
Thank you very much for all your inputs from each side of your particular expertise and experience and interpretation of the current state of affairs. And as it's true that I think we all have a part to play in ensuring a good and a bright future for South Africa and for the world. And faith and our prayers is helping us, is guiding us along, and it's the grace of God that we can still be here and still be here to support one another. And so I thank you all, and thank you for your amazing advice.